Hi everybody, and welcome to today's presentation, The Keys to Success for Navigating the 2025 Skills Economy. I'm Mark Seaman, CEO and founder of Staff Circle, and it's a pleasure to speak to you all today. Staff Circle is an AI company, but today I'm focusing on real, tangible benefits and outcomes in this presentation rather than simply the technology. Okay, let's get started. So, first up, what is changing in the workforce and why do we need better control over skills? Well, we know that AI is generating significant workforce risk and new skills are required because of AI, because AI is upending and going to upend a large number of jobs across all industries around the world. And it's estimated to upwards of 400 million jobs will be replaced by AI. Now, of course, we know that new jobs are coming through because of AI, but for those existing jobs that are going to be automated by AI, the people that occupy those jobs are going to need to be reskilled. Secondly, we've got the transformational capability of AI. Now, I don't think I need to convince anybody here about the importance of implementing AI in organizations. All organizations are going to need to implement or are already implementing AI deeper into their businesses. This is going to require a large amount of training for staff to make sure that they have the necessary skills, but also to make sure that the AI is being implemented in a safe and compliant way. And thirdly, there are already widespread skills gaps in organisations. We're already seeing this across, just looking at UK businesses, 32% of UK businesses are reporting skills gaps in their organisations. And as organisations do grapple to reduce costs, retain the best people, and progress people, but also reduce risks in hires and have an in-depth understanding of what skills are required, it becomes more and more critically important that skills are quite simply now the new gold. So all of this leads to the fact that we're going to need greater control and visibility over skills that exist in our organisations. So with that in mind, I'd like to start to understand where you are now. Now, I think that actually there are probably three main stages that we find organisations in, and when it comes to a competency or skills-based framework. So what do I mean by this? Well, I want to see here who has an understanding of all of the roles in the organisation, what they're supposed to do, what skills are required for each role, what succession roles exist. But as I say, I think there are three main kind of situations. And the first one is that organisations have a basic framework, but it's not integrated. So this means that maybe you've got skills and competencies defined in a spreadsheet. Maybe those roles have a basic definition, but the spreadsheet is not connected to anything. And so, yeah, it's like a gym membership. You know, it exists on paper, but it's not necessarily hugely valuable to everybody, especially in day-to-day processes. So please let me know if you think you're in that situation. And the second situation is to have a partial or out-of-date framework. So many organizations have maybe a basic framework that covers some of the roles or maybe some of the departments in their organizations, maybe the technical roles, but it's not complete. And maybe it's started, but still hasn't been completed yet. Or maybe you're even considering a full rebuild of the competency framework and starting from scratch. Now, if you feel you're in this situation, please, again, let me know. And the third situation, which is really common, is especially in small to medium-sized organizations, is that there's no framework in place and we're starting from scratch. This is perhaps where none of the roles are particularly defined. Maybe there's some basic job descriptions around for hiring, but there's no underlying framework. And you're literally looking at starting from scratch to build this, or bring in a competency framework from an outside organization. So if this is you, then again, let me know. So I wanted to include a slide about silos. I thought it was really important because I think it's, especially when it comes to learning development and HR and TA, I think there are many silos in organizations. And even if you look at the set of rules or processes that TA use to hire new candidates in comparison to the information that L&D use to develop those candidates when they become employees, or HR use to provide scoring for performance management, we may find that some of these things are different and not connected back to the same central source of information. I mean, even if you look at this show, it's essentially two shows connected into one. Like, you've got learning tech and then you've got the HR tech. So this presentation is really about the argument that we're making for a single unified approach that should underpin each organization. Everybody using the same rule set. And let's face it, silos rarely work. They usually diminish value rather than create value. And that's not me making a political statement. It's just what I've seen 30 years of being in business. Okay, next slide. Now, I wanted to put this slide up for a bit of fun and really to, again, knock and mock the 9-box grid, which I've been doing a lot of recently. And the 9-box grid was designed in the 70s. And when I was building this deck, I realized actually I was from the 70s as well. So I don't know what that says about me. But please let me know if you have in your existing organization or even a previous organization used the 9-box grid for measuring performance or maybe succession planning. And for those of you that don't know about the 9-box grid, it was designed in the 70s by McKinsey. The 70s pre-internet, but it's still used even today for measuring and progressing people. And the idea is that you've got this grid and you're either top right, which is fantastic, or you're bottom left, which is very bad, or you're in the middle, which is kind of like neither here nor there. And essentially the 9-box grid is a two-dimensional graph, x-axis for performance, y-axis for potential, and you divide it into these 9 squares. You sort of end up somewhere on there based on an x and y value, which puts you in a point on the graph. And it's usually from data taken from an appraisal that's been run maybe every 6 to 12 months. And like I say, you really want to be top right, not bottom left. But let's face it, there are far better ways for measuring this. And you can see why a lot of L&D and HR dislike the 9-box grid. It's not particularly encouraging for people. It doesn't really tell them why they are there rather than just where they are. And unlike the 1970s, we live in a real-time world where smartphones are prevalent and literally available to everybody in your organization. Frontline, back office, doesn't matter, everybody's got them. So integrating performance and development should lead to better outcomes. And indeed, the inventor of the 9-box grid, McKinsey, in 2021 released a white paper saying that actually integrating development with performance management is 2.2 times more likely, those organizations are more likely to outperform their peers when it comes to returns to shareholders. So that's pretty huge and a massive argument to say that we should be combining these things together and removing silos. Okay, so how to approach the problem? Well, based on the tools that we currently have and the fact that many of us are leveraging spreadsheets at the moment, or maybe nothing, how do we begin to move forwards? Where do we even start? Well, our view is that we start by creating a better role architecture. We need to create better role information for the whole organization. Every role within the organization needs to be defined. We start with a role and rich description. And then we add the skills, what skills are required for that particular role. And then for each of those skills, we define up to 4 competency levels. And each competency level has a statement. And that statement really defines what that person should be able to execute, should be able to do at that required level. And there is an example of a level 2 statement. And then finally, for each of those roles, we want to define what the potential succession roles are. We collectively know this as career pathways. And you want to deploy that for all of the organization. And by the way, behavioral skills are defined from the organization's values and behaviors. So collectively, they can define and statement pretty much how people are executing and working. And once you've got these in place, you can then move forwards by using a new type of framework, which we call a Success Circles framework. And this is our particular one, but there are others out there. And this really is designed, once you've got this integrated role architecture built, you can then connect it to all of the processes within the organization. And that has the effect of removing the silos. That's why we call it the Success Circles framework. So these are the areas that are encapsulated in this framework, and I want to cover each one briefly. So first of all, we're talking about assess. So once you've got this integrated framework in place and you know what people should be able to do and how they should be able to act in the organization, we are able to then assess them. And we can do that as part of a manager check-in. We can do a quick skills assessment. And because we've got these statements defined very specifically, it makes it a lot easier for managers, line managers, to be able to see exactly what somebody should be able to do at that level. And, that's really super important. So the next thing is to train. Well, once you understand where somebody's at and where the skills gaps are, you're able to then formulate a training plan because you know exactly what the person should be able to do and where they currently are at this point in time. And once you have that information statemented as part of the competency statements, you can then connect that much more effectively to relevant training in order to fill that. It doesn't always have to be training, it could be coaching, could be blended learning or whatever it happens to be in order to affect that change from a certain competency level to the next. And in fact, actually Staff Circle has just launched its own training objective, which basically takes a skills gap and the statement that you need to get to and automatically matches it to the relevant training. So the third one is validate. So once you know and once you've delivered training, we can then create a competency validation objective, which basically assesses the person's ability to deliver the task associated with the competency statement. And this basically validates the training has been delivered and can now be executed in the day-to-day. The next one is engage. So it's important that we drive engagement for the workforce. We all know that. But how do we do that really effectively? What better way than to leverage development conversations and to make monthly one-to-ones or weekly one-to-ones much more engaging, more valuable for the employee and the manager? Then we need to analyze. Once the framework is systemized, having access to deep analytics can drive far more effective decision making. And once it is systemized, it's much easier to do that. Perform. So ultimately, employees' development goals is to improve performance. Performance for the individual and overall performance for the organisation. And understanding the link between development and gaps and skills execution and overall performance is critical to understanding the return on investment for your development strategies and development courses in general. And finally, promote. So promote is all about knowing how somebody needs to get to the next level by using those competency statements and drawing all that information in together. So here's an example where you've got an HR assistant and this person wants to become an HR advisor and eventually HR manager. And we want to examine the communication skill here. Currently it's at level 2, which is fine. However, in order to progress to the next role, that person needs to get to a level 3. Now, because we've got these statements defined for each of those competency levels, it makes it far easier for that person to understand what they need to be able to go and do and to execute at that next level, and then to be able to go and get the correct training and the correct coaching or mentoring to achieve that higher level. And so next really is about the benefits. So what are the benefits of doing all of this? What's the outcome? Well, first of all, you can validate training can be executed in the day-to-day. And this is possible because we've now articulated exactly what the person should be able to do at the next skill level. The training there is to support that execution. Next is retention. Employee retention will improve because you have solved one of the top 3 reasons that people leave organizations. And that is that there is no perceived development opportunities. Now that you've defined them and you can now visualize them and give them to every employee and have their own development plans, we can remove that problem. And some of our customers that have deployed this type of solution have reported reductions in attrition of 50% or more. And it's not hard to see why. As humans, we want to be able to progress forward and basically visualize what we need to do to get to that next level. Next is return on investment. And that is the holy grail, is really understand what the training, what the development is driving in terms of value, overall value. And you can do that because you're removing the silos between performance management, learning and development. So you can now start to understand the relationship between the overall performance of the individual and the organization and the acquisition of those training skills. Risk. Being able to map people onto the skill levels will allow you to visualize where you've got single person dependencies across your organization, or perhaps where people haven't had the correct training. So maybe they haven't had the retraining for compliance-based skills. So this allows you to manage risk far more effectively. And this is where, the analytics comes into play. And the alignment. By having this unified framework that everybody is now running to the same set of rules, from talent acquisition to L&D to HR. It means that everybody is running to the same set of rules, the same set of equations in order to be successful. And those statements are the same wherever you want to progress in the organization. And this alignment creates a sense of fairness and a sense of unification across the whole of the workforce. And also that drives a more engaged workforce. And we'll come back to the fact that we're integrating development conversations. It makes one-to-ones far more impactful and no longer a tick box exercise. We're utilizing the existing check-in cycle that happens inside your organizations already, and we're just slightly expanding those to include skills and development. That transforms the one-to-one to be much more of a fulfilling conversation between the line manager and the direct report. And the biggest benefit of all, well, it allows you to move from juggling spreadsheets and literally mind-numbingly boring task of defining roles and skills information, which can take months and months, if not years, to build an average framework. It allows you to go from that to this, which is a fully interactive, integratable AI-powered competency framework, which for an average organization can take an hour. And even with the topping and tailing and adjusting, a week. So we're really talking about reducing a development time for a competency framework from up to a year down to a week. And that will allow not just a massive cost reduction, but will allow organizations that haven't yet deployed competency frameworks to deploy one that's deeply integrated. So if you'd like to see any of this in action, we're at Stand AA10. Please come along and we'll show you this latest release in action. We'll show you the new training objective that we launched along with the AI-powered competency framework. And also, we run a weekly webinar where we'll go further into some of these topics discussed today. So please do use the QR code if you'd like to attend one of those weekly webinars. Thank you all for watching, and I look forward to serving you in the future.